Hi everyone, it's me, Scott, back here in the office of my overnight time job with the very last episode in my long-running series, my repeatedly delayed long-running series. 14 recommendations per year from each of the last 20 years in terms of cinema. I wanted to quickly mention Luke, who gave me a very nice shout out in a video that he made for me recently. He talked up my series a little bit. He also talked about the format, the way that each year was divided in half, and so each video had 7 recommendations rather than a much longer video with 14. So I wanted to thank him for that very much, and I also wanted to ask those of you who've been watching the series how you feel about the format. Did it work for you? Was it more manageable this way? Did you feel it was a big waste of time? What have you? I'd like to hear from you. So for this video, obviously, I'm not doing that. I'm breaking the format. I'm putting all 14 recommendations on this last single video. And to make things even more complicated, I've added another thing, which I'm going to be presenting to you. 14 of my favorite Chicagoland movie theaters. Here's the first. This is the Star Cinema Grill. It is the closest theater to where I live in Arlington Heights. They have discount showings on Tuesday and Thursday all day. They serve food and drink right to your seat in the theater. The movies that I saw here recently were Mad Max Fury Road, Tomorrowland, and Jurassic World. In the summer of 2014, we had Edge of Tomorrow come out. Poorly marketed, was not financially successful, at least not here in the US. Nevertheless, quite an exciting, fun, inventive picture. Groundhog Day set in a sci-fi world is how it's commonly described. A big sort of alien invasion film in which Tom Cruise mistakenly or accidentally gains the alien's ability to repeat the same, couple of days over and over again, so he can become a better guy when it comes to fighting them off and shooting things. And there's lots and lots of gunfire, and Emily Blunt is helping him out. Also, Bill Pax is in the movie. He's got a fun little part there. Really fun movie. Just lots of fun. It kind of annoyed me when I saw it in the theater because the sound was so loud and there was constant machine gun fire in some of the scenes. But I like the scenario quite a bit. It's very effective. And Tom Cruise, is really great at playing a guy who doesn't know what he's doing at first. Although they had to squeeze in yet another scene of him riding on a motorcycle for some reason. I don't know. The AMC 600 North Michigan Avenue Theater, the entrance to which is actually 1 block west of Michigan Avenue. Last time I was here was in fall of 2008. Looks like they made some upgrades since then. Since I prefer theaters with stadium-style seating, I haven't been here in a while. I prefer, yes, the stadium-style seating. But when I first moved down here in '97, I came to this theater quite frequently. Saw Alien Resurrection here, Dark City, Deep Impact, Lost Highway. Last time I came here was for a screening at the Chicago International Film Festival, the Kelly Reichardt film Wendy and Lucy, which, as it turns out, was one of my favorite movies of that decade. Dear White People was a comedy directed by Justin Simien. I'm not really familiar with his other work, but it takes place in a fictional university in which you have a lot of conflicts between white students and black students of different types, and the whole sort of isn't it cool, isn't it black culture cool, hip-hop culture cool. Meanwhile, the black students are going, am I black enough? Am I the right kind of black? Etc. It's basically sort of a culture comedy. Tessa Thompson is one of the main characters. She's a student who hosts a podcast called Dear White People, which is all about how white people misbehave in ways that they think are appropriate around black people or what have you. Tyler James Williams, who is the main character in the TV series Everybody Loves Chris, or Everybody Hates Chris, sorry, and Dennis Haysbert are also in the movie. Really interesting, really good film. Here in Evanston, we have the Cinemark Century 12 and CineArts 6, a movie theater that has 18 screens but is divided amongst them into the mainstream releases and the art house fringe releases. Evanston is a quick ride if you live on the north side of the city.
You can get there pretty easily by elevated train. This theater just happens to be just about a 10-minute walk from where I work right now. So yeah, it's very, very convenient. I first started coming here in 2001. The first couple movies I saw here were Jurassic Park 3 and Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within, and most recently I saw Ant-Man here as well.
The Rover was an Australian post-apocalyptic thriller directed by a guy named David Michaud. I believe that's how you say his name. He did a movie set in a prison called A Prophet, which I regrettably have not seen. This movie stars Guy Pearce as a guy who gets his car stolen, and of course anyone who knows about Mad Max movies knows just how valuable a car is. So he basically goes after the guys that stole it. These guys pulled a heist, but left one of their crew behind, a somewhat mentally slow man played by Robert Pattinson. And so Guy Pearce basically kidnaps Robert Pattinson and forces him to show him exactly where the guys went, where the rest of his crew went, so he can get his car back. It's funny, although Guy Pearce is supposedly the hero of the movie, he actually ends up being responsible for more deaths than any of the bad guys. Really like this movie a lot.
This is a Regal Theater on Western Avenue. It says Stadium 14 on the outside, but it's more commonly known as the City North 14. I think it used to be an AMC, or could have been some other brand, I'm not really sure. Anyway, they have discounted admissions here on Tuesday, all day, which is nice. The IMAX theater is one that was refurbished from a regular theater, so I can't attest to its quality. But I have seen a whole bunch of movies over the years here, especially on Tuesdays when it was less expensive. The last film I saw at this particular theater was Christopher Nolan's film Interstellar.
The latest film from Wes Anderson was, of course, Grand Budapest Hotel, which came out in the early part of 2014. Pretty delightful movie. Kind of light on, you know, emotional significance for me anyway. But it's one of those movies that just looks amazing, it sounds amazing, the costumes, the sets, all the character actors are really great in it. There's lots and lots of actors who have appeared in previous Wes Anderson movies that are in this as well. And I was very, very pleased to learn that the score won the Oscar for Best Score earlier this year. It's a really, really fun musical movie. Yeah, just, you know, it's lots of fun. It's nothing really serious, of course, just lots of fun. Not my favorite Wes Anderson movie, but it's definitely like in the top 3 or 4.
This is Schaumburg, Illinois, and this particular area of Schaumburg has hosted a number of movie theaters that I've attended over the years. Just to the north of us is the Woodfield Shopping Center, which is a mall that has incredibly a large amount of square footage. They had an internal multiplex which had about 6 screens in it. They also had 4 theaters outside the main mall, but all those have been torn down now. In addition to this mall right here, which used to be called One Schaumburg Place, and had a multiplex with about maybe 12 screens on its upper floor. That one got torn down too. As a matter of fact, the theater was pretty much the only thing making money at a certain point. But now it's been rebuilt as what they call Streets of Woodfield, and this is the Streets of Woodfield AMC Theater. This first opened, I think, in 2003. The first movie I saw here was Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines. Came back the following year to see The Incredibles. I was living in the city at the time, but there were reasons why I could come out here to see a film for convenience purposes. The last film I saw here was, my mom and I came here to see Into the Woods, the musical.
A highly acclaimed horror movie came out last year called The Babadook, which was directed by Jennifer Kent. The main character is an Australian single mother whose her husband had died, and she's raising her very temperamental son, who's prone to all sorts of rather dangerous physical activity, and there's this possibility that there's an evil spirit in their house haunting them and causing all kinds of problems. It's a really, really good, creepy movie. Very, very well edited. Really like the editing in this movie quite a lot. It's good and good for some jolts. Yeah, and it's a good scary ride. I'm also quite interested in this movie that just came out called Goodbye Mommy, which looks kind of similar actually. I'm sure a lot of you know about the Babadook, and for those of you who have seen it, I have this particular theory about the origin of this supposedly malevolent spirit. I'm interested to hear what yours is as well. I'm not going to mention this video for those of you who haven't seen it, but if you leave me a comment, I will respond. I have my own theory about it, so.
Another theater that sits on a mostly empty shopping mall. This is the Landmark Century on Clark Street in Diversey in Chicago. This theater opened sometime around the year 2000. I first came here to see Requiem for a Dream, the Darren Aronofsky movie. I came here to see Time Code, the Mike Vickis ensemble comedy, 3 times. I couldn't get enough of that movie, and I saw it all 3 times here. It's hosted screenings of the Chicago International Film Festival. It has a lot of foreign movies, documentaries. The last film I came to see here was an advanced screening of Birdman last fall. Very, very nice theater.
One of my longtime favorite movies is a kind of documentary called Koyaanisqatsi. It came out over 30 years ago, and it's basically just images and music. The director of this movie, Godfrey Reggio, has made a few films in a similar fashion, but he sort of broke the mold a little bit, or at least broke with his usual modus operandi in these films with a picture called Visitors. The difference between these two movies is that the primary difference between the films he's made in the past and this one is that there's much more post-production treatment on the images themselves. It's very, very high contrast, black and white largely, and there's a lot of sort of post-production tinkering. But again, it's the same sort of similar type of thing. You've got a lot of different people and natural environments and man-made environments. All shot in this very beautiful style with this very exquisite Philip Glass score accompanying it. It's quite a different kind of picture, you know, not like the usual type of thing. There's no narrative to it. There's no speaking in it or anything like that. There's people in it, but it's not like, you know, there's a real story. It's a very different kind of picture. If you're looking for something just sort of off the wall, just completely outside the norm of what you normally would see, The Visitors, very, very interesting. And, of course, very visually striking, too.
This is the Rosemont, Illinois, and we're at the Movieco 18. This theater opened in 2008. First film I saw here was the first Iron Man movie. I've come back a few times since then. Not super close to where I was living in the city, nor is it close to me now. But it's a good theater just in terms of the size of the auditorium. The last time I came here was for San Andreas, which is not a great movie, but it was good to see on a large screen. And one thing I can always count on when coming to this theater is I'd get I wouldn't be shortchanged on screen size. That's a good thing here. So it's a nice theater, good theater.
A year after doing Dallas Buyers Club, the director Jean-Marc Vallée came out with Wild, a movie which I was extremely interested in because I'm a longtime Reese Witherspoon fan, and this was the opportunity to see her in something in which she's much less mannered than usual. She plays a real person named Cheryl Strayed, who was an addict and got divorced from her husband and decided to basically work through the grief over the loss of her mom by hiking a very, very long trail in the western half of the U.S. Yeah, again, the principal reason why I like this movie isn't just because of, you know, that it's a well-made picture just technically. But yeah, normally normally this particular actress comes off as a bit, like I said, mannered. Just everything is like excessively pre-planned in her performance for the most part. And in this one is just very, very much more naturalistic, probably the most naturalistic performance she's ever given. So it goes on my list. Gotta go on my list.
Navy Pier, one of Chicago's most popular tourist attractions. I've been coming to this theater for a number of years for particular films. Seen 3 Christopher Nolan films here, and Skyfall, saw Watchmen and Tron Legacy, and a few older movies such as Raiders of the Lost Ark and Apocalypse Now and The Wild Bunch. This screen is 8 stories tall. That's 8 stories tall. And they typically project on IMAX, 70mm film rather than digital. So if you go to a theater that says it's IMAX, but the screen is only a little bit bigger than your standard multiplex screen, you may not be getting your money's worth.
Dan Gilroy is the brother of Tony Gilroy, the director of Michael Clayton and The Bourne Legacy. And Dan Gilroy directed a film which came out in 2014 called Nightcrawler, which starred Jake Gyllenhaal as this extremely seedy and not entirely moral or ethical person who's doing everything in his power to serve his ambition to make it professionally in some way or another. He starts off by basically just stealing stuff, but eventually he acquires a video camera and starts shooting accidents and crime scene and selling it to a company, and he uses a lot of really underhanded tactics to get more money, to get more leverage, more power in what he does. He really, when I saw the movie, he really reminded me of Daniel Plainview, because Daniel Plainview wasn't like the kind of guy who says, "Oh, I want to." Become an oil man. I want to, make money by, or just, oil is the business to be in. Daniel Plainview would be the kind of guy who would get into anything as long as it made him lots of money, which starts off as silver, and then he sort of acquires the funds necessary to get oil in the first place. So this character that Jake Gyllenhaal plays is essentially the same kind of guy, only this story is set in modern times. He, is just doing whatever it is he feels is necessary in order to serve his ambition, in order to gain power, to gain money, and, he comes across quite scary in a lot of ways. So yeah, really like the movie a lot. And Renee Russo is also a key supporting character in the film. She's basically working at a television station in LA, and she ends up buying footage from him, but she regrets it after a while. She realizes after a while that she shouldn't have gotten involved with this guy professionally. Yeah, really, really interesting film.
I'm in Niles right now. This is an AMC theater called Showplace 12. It's got one of those digital projection IMAX screens instead of the best 70mm 8-story tall IMAX screens, but still a pretty nice theater. It allowed me to look at the large format version of The Hunger Games with the aspect ratio changes, and has a nice sound system. So that was the second Hunger Games actually that I came to see here. Also, I saw The Wolf of Wall Street here, and more recently Inside Out and Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. This is one of the few theaters that I can think of that actually broadens its screen for widescreen movies rather than shortens it in order to get that shape.
Of course, one movie that I was very, very excited to see in 2014 was Richard Linklater's film Boyhood, which I'd been reading about off and on over the years, and finally got to come out in Sundance, in the early part of Sundance. It was released in general theaters in the summer. Of course, everyone knows what this is about, but it's just amazing to think that he actually pulled it off. At one point, his house burned down, and when he got the money to rebuild it, he instead put it into the film because he temporarily lost funding and he wasn't able to shoot that particular year, shoot for the couple of days that he needed to for that particular year. So, quite amazing that the movie got done in its form that it did. Not my favorite Linklater movie. I think there are others of his that are better, but still, it's quite an accomplishment, and I'm really glad that it exists.
This is the Logan Theater. It's on this very busy stretch of Milwaukee in Chicago. This used to be a second-run theater. I came to see a lot of films here months after they came out at a cheap price. But it's been remodeled some, and now it's got a bar, and it's a very, very nice venue. Some of the films I've seen here include Good Night and Good Luck, the Sofia Coppola version of Marie Antoinette, The Thin Red Line, the Terrence Malick film, and of course, 50 First Dates.
There are plenty of movies that I've seen that I admire on basically an intellectual level. For example, isn't it amazing that that one movie took 12 years to make? They shot a little bit at a time. It's amazing the way it come together. Or, there's that movie that looks like it's all one big long shot and they did it in like 30 days. That's amazing. You sort of stand back from it and look at what was accomplished. You can admire it. But there are other movies that sort of just like hit you in the face with their emotional impact in ways that you weren't expecting and really involve you in the story. And that definitely happened with me on a film called The Sleepwalker. I really didn't know anything about this movie when I first picked up the disc. It's directed by Mona Fastvold, who I believe is Norwegian. because this is a largely Norwegian production. I'm not really familiar with the countries of origin of all the people involved. But the main character is played by an actress named Gitte Witt, who I believe is also Norwegian. She is basically refurbishing a house with her fiance, who's played by Christopher Abbott, who's on the television series Girls. And at one point her sister, played by Stephanie Ellis, calls up and says, "Oh, I've come to town and I'd like to see you." And when she drives to pick her up at the train station, she's there with no luggage at all, not even a coat, and clearly she's had some sort of like dissociative episode, or is just like sort of out of sorts generally in a psychological sense. And so she calls up her fiance, played by Brady Corbett, who appeared in the American version of Funny Games, to tell him that her sister is at her house. Please come and get her. So when he arrives, the four characters are basically sitting in the house, just hanging out, having dinner for a few days. But things start to get kind of tense because there's some unspoken, unresolved issues involving some burns that Gitte Witt's character received when she was much younger. She blames her sister for what happened. There was a fire started in her garage, I think, but things get more complicated than that. And after a while, things get really much more intense when one of the characters just goes missing, which is bad because it's out in the country somewhere, and who knows where this person has gone. And then another character does something really awful, and I'm just sitting there going, "No, no, no, stop it! Stop doing that! What are you doing? Please stop!" And just completely forgetting that I'm watching something. So there are some movies that I admire from kind of a distance, but there are other movies that really kind of suck me in and really get me emotionally involved, and those are quite admirable. And so The Sleepwalker is definitely something that I would recommend. I think it's a Norwegian production, but of course it's set in the States. So yeah, it's a good one. If you can find it, definitely want to take a look at it.
This is Facets Multimedia on Fullerton. It isn't just a theater, it's also a video rental shop as well as a school. They have classes here, some for kids on filmmaking and film appreciation. It's a bit of a small venue, but they show stuff that no one else in the entire city shows, which makes them very special. I saw Peter Jackson's Muppet movie, Meet the Feebles, here. It's my favorite Peter Jackson movie, and the last film I saw here was a couple years ago, the Neil LaBute film Some Velvet Morning, which is one of my favorite movies of the year.
One of the most enjoyable movies of 2014 was The Lego Movie, which was directed by Christopher Miller and Phil Lord, who did 21 and 22 Jump Street films, of course. Chris Pratt, of course, is the main character, an ordinary guy who's told by a Morgan Freeman character that he's a special guy, literally called the Special, and he gets involved with a big adventure to stop Lord Business from taking over Legoland and using the Craggle to make everything stop changing around and moving things and what have you. I saw this movie in 3D, and man, all those pieces looked like actual plastic pieces of Lego. It was really, really exciting. For those of you who've seen the original Toy Story movie, you may notice that this movie, the very last thing that happens in the Lego movie, is very similar to the very last thing that happens in Toy Story. It's a good way to end a movie, I think. Really good. And lots of fun, too.
Located on Southport in Chicago in the Music Box Theater, the theater in the city that's been open the longest, been showing movies the longest. I've been coming here for a really, really long time, off and on. Back in high school, my friends and I would drive into the city to see films like Henry, the serial killer movie with Michael Rooker, and John Woo's big movie that made him popular here in the States, The Killer, at least made him popular amongst discriminating filmgoers. Recently I came here to see the vampire mockumentary called What We Do in the Shadows, but I think the most fun time I have had here recently was the Film Spotting podcast recorded their 500th episode in front of a live audience right here, and I got to see it. They've got midnight shows, as you can see, matinees. They show a lot of stuff that nobody else is doing right now. They're showing Goodnight Mommy, which is an Austrian horror movie. Yeah, it's, there's a lot of theaters that have come and gone since I started watching movies in the city, but the Music Box, still here.
The very best movie of 2014, in my opinion, is the Jonathan Glazer film Under the Skin. Scarlett Johansson's the main character. She plays an not human creature that's acting human, walking around Glasgow in Scotland trying to pick up men and take them back to this building she's occupying where their organs get sucked out in this very, very strange process. So much is unexplained in this movie. It's based on a novel, which I would assume delves more into the mentality and the psychology of the characters. You find out a little bit more about why things are happening. But this movie is just quite a masterpiece of mood and of just like this sort of sustained dread. And the character, Scarlett Johansson, that has no name, of course, goes through this change whereby she suddenly begins to empathize with the humans that she's targeting, and that gets her in a whole mess of trouble. Some really, really great scenes in this movie. The music, the photography, everything about it is just really great. And the really cool part is that some of the encounters that she has with men were filmed without the men in the scene knowing it. They weren't actors. She just basically calls out to them from the vehicle she's driving and invites them to sit with her, and they drive around, she speaks with them. And although these scenes are like completely just sort of off-the-cuff dialogue, they are integrated very, very, very well into the rest of the movie, which obviously wasn't shot like that in any way, shape, or form. I'm very, very impressed by this movie.
The AMC River East 21 Theater on East Illinois Street in Chicago. This theater opened sometime in 2002. The first couple of movies I saw here were the Steven Soderbergh film Solaris and Harry Potter Part 2. Since that time I've been to this theater more than any other theater in Chicago. I have seen roughly 300 movies at this theater. I have seen at least 40 movies in 2011 alone. And the reason for that is because since it has 21 screens, as it is in the city, it has a very, very great selection. It has mainstream movies, big movies, small movies, big theaters, small theaters, foreign films, docs. I saw An Inconvenient Truth here. The last time I came to this theater was to see Man from U.N.C.L.E. But booyah! Sicario, baby! Gonna go see this right now. Just gonna grab a bite to eat first. I guess this makes it 301, huh? Cheers! I've seen all kinds of movies at this theater, from Star Wars, Star Trek, Marvel, Lord of the Rings, Fast and the Furious, all the way down to tiny little movies like Bug and Once. So if you're looking for a Chicago theater that has the most variety and selection and the greatest quantity of films, it's tough to beat this theater. Birdman, of course, is last year's Best Picture and Best Director winner. Not 100% sure it deserved it, but I did like the movie quite a lot. Of course, I like any movie that's set in the world of show business, in the world of actors and plays and what have you, is always some fun for me, since I used to be involved with that. Of course, Michael Keaton's the main character. He's a veteran actor who is trying to reinvigorate his career with a play that he adapted himself. Edward Norton, Emma Stone, Zach Galifianakis, Naomi Watts are a bunch of the other people who are either encouraging him or discouraging him, as the case would be. And yeah, it's technically pretty exciting as well, you know, the fact that it all appears to be one big long shot. Most of it anyway appears to be one big long shot is quite a feat to pull off. Yeah, and I like that kind of thing too, quite a bit. Right now I wanted to take a minute to talk about some of the theaters that I've been to a number of times, but sadly don't exist anymore. Theaters like the Esquire, the Fine Arts Theater on South Michigan Avenue, McClurg Court, a really nice theater with a big screen, the Village and the Village North, a couple theaters in the northern part of the city, the Three Penny, the Biograph, and 900 North Michigan. These are theaters that I've seen a bunch of movies at, especially when I first moved to the city and was spending a lot of time here regularly in late '97. Unfortunately, they don't exist anymore. So just wanted to say, miss you guys. I will have fond memories. Finally, something a little more offbeat, and I was a little bit surprised that it happened to make it to #1 at the box office when it opened. Darren Aronofsky's film Noah. Noah isn't a perfect movie, but it is quite powerful in certain scenes, and there's a bunch of the
unusual cinematic touches that Darren Aronofsky has never actually done before, but nevertheless he is known for really sort of pushing things visually. There's a scene where you see a whole bunch of people basically falling over dead, and their uniforms basically change, their clothes and uniforms change to represent all these different eras of humanity. And there's some incredible nightmare sequences and just the effects involved in just the whole building of the ark and the flood and everything like that. And I know a lot of people complained about the fallen angels that are made out of rock, and and what are they doing there? There's nothing like that in the Bible, but from what I understand, this movie is not really adapted from the Bible, it's adapted from the Talmud, which makes sense because Aronofsky's Jewish, and he would, include stuff like that. He was a fan of Noah because apparently that's been the case for a long time. Ever since he was a little kid, he was interested in the story of Noah. So yeah, whether or not you agree if any of that stuff actually happened way back in the day, it makes for a pretty exciting movie and some incredible visuals, and I was really pleased to see him make a movie like this as opposed to the handheld stuff that he did on Black Swan and The Wrestler, which I wasn't as big a fan of. So Noah is my big finisher for 2014. That's it, man. That's it. 14 over 20 years. I haven't done the math on that, but that's a lot of movies right there. And of course, I wouldn't expect anyone anywhere to watch all of these movies that I've been recommending, because most of them are ones that most of these selections are ones that you've seen some of anyway. Probably not all of them, but some of them. Yeah, I just had to do it. I'm not really sure why I even started this at this point. But yeah, I thought it would be interesting. And I hope you found it was interesting too. I wanted to say thanks again to all of you people who have been watching these episodes. And for those of you who've been commenting, especially Mr. Benway20, who's been commenting on every single year that I've covered, really, really appreciate it. Hope you've enjoyed this. Hope you've enjoyed the looks at the Chicago movie theaters that I've also shown you as well. And the next few videos I'm going to do are not going to be a series. I'm going to do some standalone videos next as a nice change of pace. Hope you'll tune in for that. And you'll find the link, of course, to the playlist with all these videos that I've done for this series below. Also the link to the Facebook page that I curate. Is that the right word? It's my CineRam Facebook page. You know what it is. Anyway, thanks again. Appreciate it very much for all of you who are interested in my stuff. Later.